morning, good day, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be reading from Herstories, which is African American folk tales, fairy tales, and true tales. So some of these tales in here are true. And the one I have picked today is a true story. And this is a true story about Miss Millie Evans, and it's called Millie Evans Plantation Times. And so just to give you a perspective now, it's not a very long story, but you know, there was a time in this country when people owned slaves, where Black people, people who look like me, were owned as slaves. And so white people owned them, and they could do whatever they wanted to do with them. They sold them, they beat them, they did whatever they could do with them. So this is about Miss Millie Evans and her story. And so just to read from the comments area, Miss Millie Evans would have been about 16 at the end of the Civil War in 1865. So that was a civil war that was fought about slavery. The South wanted slavery, and the North, some of the states in the North, didn't want slavery, so they had to fight. Here in this country, now, civil war is when people in the same country fight against each other. So that's what happened here in the United States. And it ended in 1865. The end of the war was generally known by former slaves as the surrender, because the South surrendered. The South lost, they surrendered. By her own account, Miss Evans was treated fairly well and fed well as a slave. Later, she became a cook on a plantation. She was in her elder years at the time she is speaking in the 1930s. I'm going to read what she says to you in a little bit. Her narrative reveals that her life of slavery was harsh. Can't be owned by somebody and live a life like you're on a luxury yacht or something, right? The picture of slave children eating at a trough like so many animals is shocking and revealing. It clearly shows that the slave owners thought of the slaves as less than human. Some of these things we need to know. It's part of our history, folks, and we can't sweep it under a rug. This happened in this country. And unfortunately, there are still some people, not necessarily in this country, who are being enslaved in other countries and in many parts of the world. They valued the slaves, of course, but only as property, something you own. Animals to be worked, fed, and driven, the same as horses and cows, human beings. Obviously, the owner's knowledge of the war and surrender was limited, since they believed they could move to Arkansas and avoid giving their slaves freedom. They thought once freedom came, they could move and take their slaves with them. And actually, there's a date coming up called Juneteenth, and I'll find a story in that to read to you. And that was the day. It was 3 months after the slaves had been freed, but there were those who took their slaves. So there was over in Galveston, Texas, the slaves who were there didn't even know they had been freed. It wasn't until 3 months later. So they were still working as slaves until June 19th. The story was abridged and adapted from Miss Evans. Abridged means shortened. So let me read Miss Evans' story to you. Millie Evans, Plantation Times, North Carolina. That's in the South. My birthday always comes in the fodder pulling time. And fodder pulling time is when they pull the crops. My mama told me she was pulling fodder until the hour before I was born, me born in 1849. At the time of surrender, I was a young lady. Don't remember the owners' names, but I remember there was about 100 of us kind. 100, the owner owned 100 slaves. The owners were rich. Mistress tended to us, the women. The master took over the men. At 4 o'clock each morning, he would ring the bell for us to get up. Oh, you could hear that bell all over the plantation. I can hear it now. Ting, ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling. I can see all of us stirring, getting up in Carolina. Mistress raised me, but I stayed with my mama every night. My mama had to work very hard, and if mistress thought the little black children like me were hungry between the meals, she would call us up to the house to eat. So she was being, they would, the kids were treated kindly by the mistress, but there were some slaves who weren't treated very kindly, folks. So let's not think this is the way it always was. She would call us up to the house, okay, to eat. We had Johnny cakes sometimes and plenty of buttermilk to go with it. See, they put the buttermilk in a long trough. The trough is a little thing where pigs eat from. Okay, animals. They kept the trough very clean. They filled the trough with buttermilk, and we little black children would get around the trough and drink into our mouths. We'd hold our Johnny cake in our hands. The cooking was always done outdoors by the black folks because there were so many of us. Greens were cooked in a black pot, the kind you wash clothes in. They crumble bread in the pot liquor and give us spoons, and we would stand round the pot and eat. We usually ate out of gourds and had homemade wood spoons. Dinner time was regular sit down, and the table with an oilcloth over it was set under our chinaberry tree. Oh, we had plenty to eat. We grew all the food, raised plenty of meat, raised sugar, rice, peas, chickens, eggs, cows. I remember when freedom came. The Yankees said, "Free!" like that. Master didn't want to part with us, and he thought if we all went to Arkansas, he shouldn't have to send us off into what we didn't know about. We were all afraid to be free. So freedom was a good thing, but they were afraid. They didn't know anything else but slavery. Afraid one would get gone from the other. So we loaded up all the wagons. Off we all went, all 100 of us, and mistress and master and their children, and horses, cows, everything. We had plenty to eat and plenty of horse feed. We traveled hard, 15, 20 miles a day, camped at night, and cooked enough in the morning to last us all day. We drove the cows with us. But on the way, the owner, him, died. So master died. We camped while they carried him back to North Carolina. Mistress went with him. She came on back and we went to Arkansas. We reached it safely, although 3 of us slaves died. We buried them along the way. And we got there, we found out that freedom was already there ahead of us. It was right there too. There was something. That was something. Mistress begged us to stay with her. She was old by then, and she soon died. We stayed until they took her body back to Carolina. There wasn't none of them left but her daughter. She soon married and was gone. We lost track of the son. Don't remember all of it from them days, but I do remember some such. And that's the story of Miss Millie Evans, who was a slave. She was a child slave. And some slaves were treated very, very badly. A lot of them were treated badly. But you imagine being owned by somebody else, and you're a human being just like they are, and they own you. Can't be a good thing. And that's why the Civil War was fought, to free the slaves. And we need to learn more about this history of ours here in this country. All men are created equal, right? One nation under God. But when they said that, it didn't really apply to all men. It applied to some men in the Constitution. So with that, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. And I will be reading stories which are, as you know, culturally relevant. That's what I try to do. Some fairy tales, folk tales, but this one is a true story. And it talks about some of our history here in this country. Thank you very much. And we will see you next time.